Don't nuke and pave. If there's any doubt, swap it out.
Yep.
There you go, David. You can post that little nugget of wisdom.
I shall. That's my contribution for the day. I'm out of here.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs and Security First IT. And joining me as always is Donna Grindle of Cardin. How's it going, Don?
It's going great, David.
Good deal. So anything interesting, any flooding happened this week after the hurricane?
Hey, we were worried because at one point those spaghetti lines had it coming right at us. And we didn't experience that joy that you guys did.
Yeah, we had a little bit of damage. Of course, I was out of state when it happened. So I'm in San Antonio, Texas. We're having hurricanes in South Carolina. But it rains the entire time I'm in San Antonio. So I pull up a national weather map, and the only two places in the entire United States that it is raining is San Antonio and South Carolina.
Your house and where you are.
Like,
I'm just saying,
you just can't get away from
people.
it. So
there's a dark cloud that follows him everywhere.
Yeah. So yeah, we had some unfortunate damage, and some shingles blew off and water got in and all that good stuff. But I'll be dealing with that for a little while.
Well, compared to what some of those people are dealing with, you're lucky.
Oh, very. But
you're fine. You're good.
Yeah, I did have one guy that had water, come all the way up to his, backyard fence or whatever. So I told him, I said, you probably should run out and refi your house really quick while you have waterfront property. I'm sure it's worth a lot more right now.
Yeah, do it quick.
Yep. So anyway, we got one more place I think you're going to be this year, and then the boot camp, which may already be sold out.
Yeah, probably by this time there's nothing.
Yep.
Because at this point it's everybody trying to get approval to get those last seats. I don't know. It's a race.
Yep.
Can we send another one? All right.
Yep.
They're there. First come, first serve. That's all I can say. So, yes, but I'm going to be with the Georgia Pediatric Practice Administrators at their fall session down by the Atlanta airport. Yeah, I got to be down at the airport at like 7:30 in the morning.
And you're not even going anywhere.
I know. I may have to just stay down there so I can be in a better mood when I'm there. But I'm talking with those folks, and I love my pediatric practices. They're so much fun. They have to be.
Yeah.
And that's on October 18th. And then the very next exciting event is our boot camp.
Yes.
So
can't wait for that.
And we're getting a long list of, we'll just send so-and-so to the next one. Crap.
Yeah.
When are you going to have the next one? Because that's the next question. And right now, we do not know.
Yeah. It will be within Q1 maybe of next year.
Yeah.
It won't be any more
Probably
this year.
Probably the end of Q1, beginning of Q2.
Yep.
Which would be, for most people who just worry about a calendar, March or April.
We'll do it somewhere around St. Patrick's Day to April Fool's.
Somewhere in there. I don't know. Anyhow, we are looking forward to this one. And
like we don't look forward to the other ones. We didn't look forward to the other ones, but we're looking forward to this one.
No, yeah, that's true. As we talked about before, every time the kids say, I'm not going to lie. Well, do you usually lie?
I will not answer that.
Well, yeah, there you go.
All right. So that brings us to our topic for the day, which, I guess it could be titled 3 Stories that Techs Should Know About, or it could be titled Donna Was Right. I'm just not sure which way we're going to go with this.
And I can prove it.
Not sure. So 3 stories that techs should know, or Donna was right. So I'll leave it up to the listeners to vote on that one. So Mr. and Miss Listener, wherever you are, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, just go ahead and put out your vote for this episode. Let us know which one it is.
for me, I went with 3 stories tech should know because I try not to be the I told you so person that horribly. I just make sure everybody realizes I was right and then we move on.
See, I hashtag it. David was right.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. When it happens, it's so exciting. And
Yeah, no kidding. You're on it today. You must have 2 cups of coffee.
Oh, really? And some water, Okay, so you ready for story number 1?
Yes. Tell me a story.
Story number 1 is the one that got me all fired up to do this episode. Then I saw the other 2 and I went, bam, perfect. I can do these all together. So this is something that you and I have had so many conversations about, both on this podcast and at HIPAA for MSPs. And I've had it when I'm working with IT companies and dealing with those data breaches, the ones where I get called in after the fact when it's too late.
Yeah.
I can't begin to tell you how many times we've had this conversation with tech folks. And if you're not a tech person, you need to make sure that your tech people don't believe the wrong thing here. You need to make sure they understand. And if they argue with you, you make them listen to this. Okay. So
tell them Donna was right and then make them listen to it.
You strap them to a chair, put the headphones on and hit play. Okay. So here's the thing is that going back to 2016, when OCR released their guidance that said you have to treat ransomware attacks as any other potential breach of PHI.
Okay.
And you remember when that came out and we were like, okay, this says that you got to investigate. It doesn't mean that the minute you have a ransomware attack, you have to notify everybody.
Yeah.
It says that you need to investigate what happened and determine if data was, exfiltrated or there was someone that infiltrated your network. So did they steal your data or did they wander around your network and do things that you're not aware of?
Right.
It's not unreasonable for them to make that decision and to see it that way. But what that means is all of the technical people can't do what it is that they believe they should do.
Yes. Yes, we tend to go with what we term the nuke and pave method. So the nuke and pave means we basically just completely delete everything on the drive, on the computer, and start all over. Reinstall Windows operating system or whatever it's on it. Because, we don't have time to try to fix it. We just want to get it back up and running.
Yeah. And the argument is I need to get these folks back up and running as quickly as possible. That's what my clients expect of me. I get it. However, you can't do that under the law.
Right.
Because you have to have an investigation. And the only way to have an investigation is to do the research on that data that's on the machines that you just completely wiped and now I can't see.
Bad deal. So that's why we always, we just pull the drives out. I mean, I know some people will like make a forensic copy of the drive. We just replace the drive. We just pull it out, put a new one in, keep the old one. And that way it's just faster and easier that way.
Well, and the forensics folks, they do need like a exact byte by byte copy, which is not a backup.
Right.
And pulling out the drives is one of the easiest ways to solve both problems. But you need to make sure that you number the drives.
Yeah.
Tech people, just make sure you know what order they were in. Get big, not Post-it notes. Those come off. Use.
Yeah. And you probably don't want to image the drive over with the problem.
No.
Just saying.
So, yeah, just saying. So there's a lot of things but that goes with actually having a ransomware plan.
Yep.
When we say, do you have a ransomware playbook, like an incident response playbook? That's what you're supposed to have. And that's what we keep telling people is you need to have these things. You can't just nuke and pave or wipe and reload or whatever the latest term is that they're using for it. I understand that you need to get them back up and running. Remember, patient care comes first. And this isn't about compliance. It's about
patient care.
But the big issue here is that it's also about making sure that you don't have a bigger problem. And more than once in these investigations, they have found bigger problems than one would think if you were just handling it this way. And you would say, well, there's nothing but, they encrypted the files and nothing else. Ransomware is way more complicated now.
Mm-hmm. But I wonder what would happen if somebody had nefariously nuke and paved a PC so that people could not tell what happened.
I know, really? Because here's where I get to say I was right.
I knew you'd do it anyway.
I know, really.
Miss, I don't like to rub it in, but since we're talking about it.
This all I'm saying is vengeance is mine. I feel as though
vindicated.
It's all of the people that gave me a hard time and didn't believe that this was important. Listen up. So Primera, who had a huge data breach back in 2015,
mm-hmm.
11 million people.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah, that's right. 11 million. So, of course, that's followed by a lot of class action lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
And this is different, and a lot of people don't understand this. And you pointed out I need to make sure I am clear in explaining the difference. When there's a data breach and OCR is evaluating it, OCR is evaluating your compliance with the HIPAA law. And that's what they're looking at, and they only enforce that over you. HIPAA does not have an element in the law that allows the individuals and the patients to sue for negligence or any other violation of HIPAA, however you want to call it, as a legal thing.
Right.
So instead of saying, well, you have blasted my information out, you may have destroyed my life, and there are people I know that are having to change their social security number and get a whole new life because their data got stolen, which is, in some ways that might be fun to just start over, but it's really, truly not. We both know that. So at any rate, when these class action lawsuits are filed, or any of these lawsuits that are about a HIPAA violation, then they have to use some other standard that allows them, they can point to HIPAA and say, this is what you're supposed to be doing, you weren't doing, potentially. And there was some negligence, and there have been cases where they say HIPAA is a standard of care and you weren't following it. But all of these things are working their way through the court system because you have to find some law that says they broke the law that I can sue them about when they're doing these class action lawsuits. Mm-hmm. And the big difference, the privacy ones where you've got the little one or two cases, those are usually very personal and very clear that there has been harm. So then it just becomes, can you prove the next step, which is somehow I didn't do what I was supposed to do, that I could have prevented this. Right. So I had some negligence. But in the data breach ones, you've got 11 million people, and it's really hard to say, has there been harm? And without harm, as the Primera's defense, no harm, no foul. I'll see you bye.
Right.
So if you can't prove that data was exfiltrated in some way, then it's really hard for you to say that something happened.
Now, in this case, though, is proving harm, is it just the fact that it was exfiltrated? Does that prove harm, or does it have to be something more than that? Like the patients have to be able to prove that with the exfiltration of the data, something else happened that caused harm.
Yeah, so therein lies part of our problem, is that, remember, everything starts at the state level. Mm-hmm. And every state has different laws and different ways of looking at things. And
for now.
Really. And so Athens Orthopedic, we remember that story from 2016, the Dark Overlord, and how that was handled poorly. In the state of Georgia recently said, even though you could prove that their data was out for sale on the dark net, They could prove that their identity had been stolen and used, and they could prove that there were problems with that. The Georgia Supreme Court said, yeah, but you still can't prove that they harmed you, So it's been sent back down to further evaluate. So it's more than just harm. But if I can't even start with that, then there's no real argument, oh, you lost my data. What other law do I stand on? So I have to say you have hurt me in some way in order to have that lawsuit.
Okay.
And that doesn't matter. I mean, if it's two businesses or two people or people in a business, that's what those lawsuits are about. So harm is the first step in the data breaches. It's pretty quick on the small ones because those are so personal. There's a lot involved. But the data breaches, it's complicated to prove harm. And that's what all of these lawsuits are doing. And it's not just healthcare this is happening in. I mean, Equifax just settled for one of theirs for a big chunk of money, and they're still dealing with them worldwide. So don't see that as just a healthcare problem. The harm issue is where this comes into play. So in this particular case with Premera, they're saying the same defense that everybody else said. And the patients have said, look, you're saying that the data wasn't exfiltrated, and that's the only way I could have harm in this case. Because if they were just wandering around the network, they were likely, doing something to the business, not to the individuals. And the identity theft and all that happens when you've pulled the data out. So they're trying to prove harm. Mm-hmm. So now we get back around to why I'm right. Because on August 30th, the lawyers for the breach victims, they filed a motion seeking sanctions against Premera, the health insurer, for, quote, misconduct in destroying a computer hard drive and logs that contained evidence related to the theft of data by hackers. Uh-huh. Basically, what happened was, let's say they had like 20-something computers that were hit with this ransomware. Mm-hmm. One got nuked and paved.
Let me guess, it was the one that would prove it all.
Well, that's what they're claiming. But the reason that they're claiming it is this was a software developer's computer. It was a technical person's computer. And the technical person had all kinds, how much crap we have on our systems that allow us to scan and update and access systems and test things and get access to data. We have a boatload of stuff on our computers. Mm-hmm. And when it got hit with the ransomware across the network, of course, the tech person goes, I've got work to do. Nuke and pave. Yeah. So therein lies one of the problems, because they're saying that's destroying evidence. And according to the motion, it says, quote, by willfully destroying a computer that hackers used in the data breach and which may have held evidence of data exfiltration, and B, data loss prevention software logs that may have shown evidence of data exfiltration, Premera spoilated, I love these legal words, spoilated key evidence and prejudiced plaintiff's ability to achieve a rightful decision in this case. So they're asking, and they're saying the sanctions that they're calling for are, instruct the jury that because of the destruction of the computer and the logs, they must presume that the data exfiltration occurred.
Okay. There you go.
I mean, come on. It had all kinds of legitimate utilities that allowed you to grab the data and pull it down quickly. It was, it had plenty of, how we are. We've got plenty of disk space, high-speed machines. We're kind of probably maybe giving ourselves a priority on the firewall or something.
Well, not only that, but if I remember reading it correctly, didn't they say that this computer was like near end of life and they were going to get rid of it anyway? And if that's the case, then why nuke and pave it?
I don't know. So,
kind of fishy.
The bottom line is they're saying, what?
Kind of fishy there.
I know there's a lot of questions and but we don't have every single detail of, at least in the article about the destroying evidence charge, it doesn't give us every single detail.
Yeah.
But really what I cared about is here's a ransomware attack. They did what the attacks always want to do and argue with me about doing. And now here we are in court 3 years later being charged with destroying evidence. And, I mentioned it to some of the lawyer folks I work with, and they're like, frankly, I'm surprised it hasn't been used before.
Right.
But we all agree this is the first time we've seen it being used. Well, hello, you know what that means?
That means it's going to get more use.
Yeah. So all of you who have done it, if there's a suit going on, beware.
Yeah.
Because now it's going to come back to haunt you that you didn't listen to what I was saying.
Yeah, because now they can reference case law.
Yeah. So now the idea's there. It's going to be out there and it's going to be used. So everybody's going to come back on all those ransomware lawsuits and try to figure out what happened. And probably had this one not happened, they could have proven in their investigation that there was no exfiltration or infiltration and then not had to notify.
Yeah.
There are times where the forensics folks are able to save the tax keister.
This is true.
But they're able to find the stuff that gives us the information that keeps them out of trouble. But even then, the forensics folks are going above and beyond what they should have had to do in the first place. And they're costing their, the company that suffered the ransomware attack is paying way more money because of what you've done. And whether it ends up in a lawsuit like this, or it ends up paying more money for the folks at forensics to try to have a good guess that there's no activity on the network that's nefarious and that no data has left. So I'm saying, boom, mic drop.
So you're saying you're right.
I'm just saying.
I'm saying you're right.
So the moral of this story is have a written ransomware response plan that everyone understands.
Yeah. And don't assume that your technical staff or your IT company or whatever, don't assume that they know how to properly handle this.
Yeah, there's a lot more to that. This goes back to the same thing that when you were explaining when you do your session for technical people, and you're explaining to them when they think they know HIPAA, you show them the real picture.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And what was it that you said there was? Because, well, tell them what you do.
I basically put the entire HIPAA law, as far as like a diagram, put it up on the slide, and then we go down and say, okay, you say HIPAA. Well, then all right, here's HIPAA, and then here's the parts of HIPAA, and then here's the subparts of HIPAA, and then the subparts of that. So I go all the way down until they get to the actual technical safeguards of the security rule. I'm like, this is what you know. Okay, you see how small this is. This, we're talking what, I don't know, 8 pages or whatever. This is what you call knowing HIPAA. So understand there's this whole world out here that you don't know anything about.
Yeah.
And it's okay that you don't know that, but just understand you don't know that.
Yeah, that overconfidence is what gets people in trouble.
Right. Or that's when they come in, I guess one of the things that kind of drives me crazy is they come in and they say, we're going to do a security risk analysis for you. And then when you start really looking at it, they're just doing a technical analysis. They're not doing a full HIPAA risk analysis, but they're telling people they are because they don't know any better.
Yeah. It doesn't have, where's the location of all my PHI? It doesn't look at the, they'll tell people, oh, I'm doing a security risk analysis. Well, the very first thing I ask is, okay, well, what are the security settings of the EHR? Do you have that in the report?
Yeah, like, no, that we don't deal with that.
Exactly. Yes, there you go. So Again, I'm right the minute.
I know. And it's just, just know what you don't know somehow.
Well, just accept that you don't understand this stuff is a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Start there. And that it is more complicated. And there's some gray areas, but the bottom line is, can you make a proper argument? Well, you can't make a proper argument if you don't understand all the elements that you need to argue.
Yeah.
So,
and if I hear somebody else say that HIPAA is just a bunch of best practices that, is subjective and there's no real guidance, I'm going to choke somebody if I keep hearing that.
I know. Yeah.
What we're talking about right now is guidance.
Yeah. Their guidance said, this is what you need to do. And everybody says that's not guidance. It says, treat it like, yeah. And then you've got the corrective action plans and the audits. It's all there if you choose to read it.
Yeah. Well, it may not have the words guidance on it, but, if I'm driving down the road and get pulled over and get a ticket, I don't really have to need guidance on whether or not I should have been going that speed. I think the fact that I got a ticket tells me I probably shouldn't have been speeding. I don't need guidance.
Well, that doesn't happen to everybody that way. Sometimes you're just driving. But, yeah, it's telling you information that you should be able to gather just from this.
Right.
Or any of the other settlements where they've announced the corrective action plans and all of those kind of things. There's plenty of information out there if you will read it and take the time to read it, where it says this must be treated like any other potential breach.
Or just listen to the podcast and you don't even have to read it.
Really? Come on. That's why we're here.
Donna's done all the hard work for you.
I know. We have like 100 and something hours at this point. I don't know, 174. It's not they're not hour long, but hey, you know what I'm saying.
Right. You have 174 reasons that you should know how this stuff works.
Because this is 174. So, yeah. So, anyhow, bring it is what I have to say. But the bottom line is you have to know what you're doing when these attacks occur. People need to understand, even if you have the technical skills to do the nuke and pave, you don't do it.
Right.
And people need to understand that even though it's important to get everything back up and running as soon as possible, we need to know exactly what we're going to do to make that happen and still be able to do a proper forensics investigation.
Mm-hmm.
And one other thing, I don't know any IT company that has, just your basic MSP. Now there's some probably, but the vast majority do not have the skills on staff to do those forensics investigations.
No, it's too expensive to have that stuff done. Most MSPs or IT vendors will have another vendor they outsource that to.
Yeah. And sometimes your insurance coverage requires you to use a certain vendor, and sometimes there'll be a team that you're referred to and they know the vendor, so they'll choose the vendor that you're going to use. But keep that in mind is that if your IT company says you're okay, here's another red flag.
Yeah.
So, yes, these are stories the techs need to hear, but you need to be watching out for them. And we'll get into that in story number 3. Oh, but one other little news story in other news about ransomware. Mm-hmm. I saw that this got my attention because a brewery had been shut down because of ransomware. Oh, mm-hmm. But the bottom line is the way they got to them was that on their website, they had job openings posted and an email address for you to send your resumes. It's important to note that this is in Britain, so they're called CVs, not resumes, and more people are calling them CVs. But in response to that job posting, all of a sudden they started getting emails from all over the place applying for that job with, all the CVs and resumes attached. And so the folks getting it thought, you know what? Somebody must have posted us somewhere on a website somewhere. It's a big company. You never know. And they opened them and they were infected, and bada boom, boom, bada bang. So just think about that. I get a resume, and like one of the top ways to send malware is attached to an Office application. At least ask for your resumes to be in PDF.
Yeah, and don't click on any
it
links.
doesn't mean it can't happen, but you know what I'm saying.
All right, so as far as story number 1 goes, for technical people, if there is any doubt, swap it out.
Ooh, I like it. If there's any doubt, swap it out. We need to write that down. Hopefully, then we will lose that piece of paper. But that's it. Don't nuke and pave. If there's any doubt, swap it out.
Yep.
There you go, David. You can post that little nugget of wisdom.
I shall. That's my contribution for the day. I'm out of here. All right, story number 2.
Story number 2. This one is showing that security settings must be configured properly the first time, but also checked and double checked regularly. And this speaks to how much pushback we get about having a checklist about how you should configure things securely in, if it's a new server, it's a new desktop, it's a new laptop, it's an iPhone. And you should have a checklist that says this is the requirements right here. And I'm going to go through those requirements for that thing. And that thing could be, I don't know, an AWS bucket.
Not the first time this has happened.
No, and this happens like all the time.
Yeah, so AWS is the Amazon Web Services. So if you're using the Amazon Web Services, the S3 buckets, this is for you.
Well, for those who don't know, the Amazon Web Services is a whole nother business way outside of what is shopping at Amazon. Amazon has massive computer resources and
infrastructures and all kind of
infrastructure and speed. They have it in order to run their business. So then they said, hey, why don't we just juice it up and sell some of that too?
Mm-hmm.
And a vast majority, I would say, of the big companies use AWS. Tons of smaller companies use AWS.
Mm-hmm.
They're software developers. I think you even store stuff out there, don't you?
Yeah, I have.
I know we do. Yep. Not a lot, but... And the number of times that someone will say to me, when I say, how do you secure your application? They say, oh, we're good. We're on AWS.
Yeah. They're HIPAA compliant.
They're HIPAA compliant. We're all good. Okay. So here's a story. It's a horror story.
One dark and stormy night.
Oh, not really. It's almost time. It's almost time for Halloween. Okay, so there's this company, UpGuard Cyber Risk Team. UpGuard is the company, and they have a cyber risk team that they're always out there hunting for problems, trying to be the ones that find the problems before the bad guys do.
Okay.
Which there's lots of folks that do this, and we are very thankful they're out there doing that work.
Mm-hmm.
Then, we got a fighting chance of protecting some people. And this is, would you believe it's a North Carolina company?
No.
Yes. It's like they're just going to sit right here in the Southeast. There's going to be a connection to everything in there. But this company's called MedCall Healthcare Advisors.
Okay.
And they run these plans where you can call in and get advice from healthcare providers. That's kind of, hey, my leg is pointed backwards.
This bone is
and there's
out.
blood shooting out of my knee. What should I do? Yeah. So anyway, UpGuard Cyber Risk Team finds a S3 storage bucket, an Amazon S3 storage bucket. So basically, it's just like a giant, think of it as giant Dropbox.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't understand what AWS is, it's just a giant Dropbox out in the cloud for programs to be able to easily pull data from and run programs and so on and so forth. Right?
Right.
And this was a 7 gig storage bucket. So not huge, but not small.
Right.
We don't store 7 gig of data out there. Ours is all small images and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they find this thing, and in this bucket, the report from UpGuard said that detailed medical information for employees of 181 business locations as well as personally identifiable information for nearly 3,000 individuals, was publicly exposed in an unsecured storage bucket. It was data from their intake system. So when you first call and they take down all your information, then that's where it would get stored. It was these PDFs, which are not hard to read. So there was likely some tech person somewhere responsible for creating that, because you don't have your average Joe go out there and do it, or Jane.
The funny part about that, though, is, okay, so it's a 7 gigabyte storage bucket. And this, Amazon charges you per gig, and it's like 2 cents. So this was a 14-cent problem.
Oh, that's even worse.
14 cents.
So we got 3,000 individuals, 14 cents. Oh, man, that's just stabbing you in the heart, isn't it? So if you're the one that's believing that because somebody that does software for you or stores data for you says, don't worry, we have AWS. Hello, guess what? It could be publicly accessible like this. And they found it and they notified them. And then once they were certain that it had been secured, they let the story out. And their quote was, "This incident serves as an example of how third and fourth party risk can compromise the privacy of individuals and companies if data handling practices are not properly monitored and controlled." Medical information is not just exploitable, but extremely personal, intimate, and its exposures entail more than just the possibility of fraud that accompanies all PII, a fact underlying the privileged status of the doctor-patient relationship. I thought that was a great quote. This is why when we tell tech people, you need a checklist every time you're going to build something like that, here are the security settings, and we got to make sure they're done. And then every so often, we're going to have you go back out there, complete some paperwork that shows that you checked it and those security settings are in place. And we're going to do it on a regular basis, and we're going to call that an audit. And we're going to tell you to write it down. That's it.
That's just too much.
These are things, I know, these are things that you should be doing. And yes, I know, I've set up 1,000 AWS buckets. I don't care. People make mistakes. People get confused.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've seen, it's technology. Things can change. Like, you didn't change it. It just changed.
Well, yeah, there's an update that changes how your settings are perceived, and they add a new one, or you never know. But what's important is, had they been doing these audits, and maybe they had been auditing it, and just after it changed is when these folks found it. My guess is not so much, because that rarely happens. But if they had been, guess what? They're going to have documentation to show, look, right up until this moment, everything was okay.
Right.
So now we're just going to look at this short piece of time frame and figure out what happened. So again, when I ask you to do the audits and do the checklist and write this stuff down, there's a reason. Because if those things were being done, there's 3,000 people going to be notified of a data breach. They better be.
Your 14-cent data breach.
Unless you could, I don't know. That's the sad part. Unless you can prove within a certain amount of reason, you can be reasonably sure that no one accessed that data. Now, there's ways to do it, but there's logs and all this kind of stuff, and who knows who's nuked and paved those.
Yeah.
So the moral of this story is, audits, they're not just there to make things hard for you, but they have got to be done for a reason. And if you have that writing or that written documentation in place, you don't have to worry when something happens. You've got documentation to show what you knew and when you knew it. What did the president know and when did he know it?
Well, speaking of who knows what and what they do with it and who's responsible for it, that leads into story number 3.
That's right. So we've got the moral story number 1, moral story number 2, and really and truly, story number 3 is the moral to story number 1 and 2.
Yeah. What happens when things go wrong?
Yeah. So this is a report from Kaspersky Lab Global Corporate IT Security Risk Survey. It's called From Data Boom to Data Boom, the Risk and Rewards of Protecting Personal Data. It's a worldwide study. It's across all countries and all types of businesses. They did break it down between small businesses and enterprises, so you can't say, well, that's not me. But it's got a lot of great data in it. But one of the things that's so interesting and important is that one of the most common responses to a data breach is for business to enforce formal rules within their organization. Hello, they start doing what they should have been doing in the first place. And 33% of the small businesses and 38% of the enterprises begin applying additional policies and requirements after it's occurred. So why not go ahead and do it, is again the thing. But then came the real moral of story number 3. If you're not going to do those things and you're going to not agree to eat your broccoli, as one developer told me when I explained, look, these are things you're doing anyway. I want you to write them down. Oh, so you just want me to eat my broccoli like mom wants me to eat the healthy stuff? Yeah, that's it. But people lose their jobs. And it isn't clear, how many, exactly. But the bottom line is that they say laid off, but we both know. Okay. It could be laid off, but the fact that they're showing it across the technical folks, it's clear that people are going to lose their jobs, and you want to be the ones to show that you are prepared and serious, even if your upper management isn't. Start writing the stuff down. Have copies of this. Save it out there. Protect yourself. Because here's the list. Number 1 would be senior IT security people.
Ooh.
Shock and awe. So 36% of small businesses and 45% of enterprises report job losses in that area. Mm-hmm. Then you get senior IT, 33%, 37%. So we're looking at basically 1 in 3.
So this is where you separate those who are responsible and then those who are accountable.
Yes, exactly. So you got senior IT security, senior IT, senior non-IT, which is why we are making sure that even though you aren't the one having to do the technical stuff, don't just trust them and believe them.
Accountability.
There you go.
Not responsibility.
And, exactly. And then you get functional IT. So that's 1 in 4.
Where's dysfunctional IT at on the list?
Yeah, it's way at the end. They're likely the cause of the problem, but nobody knows they're there. And then you finally get down to like C-level, functional IT security, functional non-IT. Those are nowhere near the same levels. Now, C-level is equal to functional IT at the enterprise, but not in small business because most of the time that's the owner of the company.
But, in an enterprise, you're 24%, likely that at a C-level, you're going to be gone.
Yeah, so, you've got a 1 in 3 chance or 1 in 4 chance, whichever way you want to look at it. If you were the one that's supposed to make sure that this stuff is being done, or you were supposed to be doing it, then there you go. Roll the dice. But, I can tell you, I'm almost certain that I read that the employee that did the nuke and pave no longer works there. But you hear it all the time. That employee is no longer there. So I say that the moral of story number 3 is document your stuff.
Yeah. Protect yourself.
What about yourself? If you can prove that you're doing everything, you're meeting industry standards, you're protecting the information, then you can say, I ate my broccoli. Mm-hmm. And because you ate your broccoli, you can continue to afford broccoli because it's expensive to eat healthy.
Yeah.
So clearly, I think we've demonstrated, A, I was right. B, if you do what I tell you, you'll keep your job. And C, it's not just the technical people that need to worry about these things. If you're in charge, you're in charge.
Right. You are accountable.
Yeah. Spread the word. Yeah.
Well,
I'm either supposed to be doing it or supposed to be making people do it.
Right.
So go for it.
Yeah. I mean, even for the technical companies out there, you got a technician out there running around doing all the work. You need to make sure they're doing it right. I mean, surely if you've run a business for any length of time, you are always finding things that didn't get done the way they were supposed to.
Oh, good Lord. Yes.
So, I mean, I've run into that. Fortunately we get rid of most of them when it happens, but I mean, sometimes we run across something a year down the road and like, why was this done this way? You go back and look at your documentation and the person that you fired a year ago is the one that set it up and you're like, golly.
Or you have somebody that's doing great and then for whatever reason, they're just sick of their job or things are going wrong at home. So forever they documented everything properly and now all of a sudden they're not documenting anything properly.
Yeah.
And that's why we do the audits and follow up and ask questions and have the checklist.
Yep. All good information.
Yes. We always try to share good information, not bad.
Sometimes we might.
It's funny though.
All right, folks. That is our show for today. So now you understand how to keep your job and keep proving Donna's right.
Protect patient information. That's the number one thing we worry
I thought
about.
it was proving Donna was right was the number one thing.
Well, that's number two.
Number two. All right, so we got it.
Yeah.
All right, folks. So remember, if you like this episode, and there's no reason why you shouldn't, make sure you share it out on your favorite social media site. Rate us on the podcasting app. Spread the word. We always appreciate your responses and your ideas. Send us an email if you want to at contact@helpmewithhipaa.com. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, I'm sure Donna will read it. So remember, for Donna and myself, that HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.